Alright, so here we are, lesson 9. Alright, you should have already imported the DRP, and I'll open it up in my project manager.
And we've got all the medias offline, so got to relink. And I'm just going to let it search my desktop.
And it's found it and linked it up, and then I will save. So Fusion is really simple to get to. What you need to do is jump down to the bottom of the tab and click on the Fusion page, and you're in.
And this timeline here will be the exact frame in which you were at the edit page. Fusion. Alright, so let me talk about the interface. At the very top, you've got your interface toolbar. This is the same as all the other pages. It just has a few different things here. So media pool, nodes, clips. This side, it's got spline and keyframes. That's going to be important when you are animating moves or changing keyframes. Metadata and inspector, you guys know what that is. All right, below are your viewers. These are they're similar to the viewers here, but they actually function in a very different way. These are just monitors. So these just give me a preview of nodes. Below that is my timeline bar. It's actually in frames. This is the beginning, this orange line here, and this is the end of my clip. So this clip right here, this is the endpoint. I'll go to Fusion, and this timeline bar is at the endpoint, and then I can scroll to the last frame, and I'll jump back, and it's at the last frame. So this is your timeline bar, but it's in frames. Below your transport controls and below that are all the tools that are in this toolbar. There are many, many, many more tools in Fusion, but these are the most commonly used tools here.
All right, by default, the work area displays the node editor. Fusion doesn't use a timeline for layering as you see it in the edit page, but it uses this node tree. And in which each image or effect is represented by a node in the node editor. And these nodes are connected in a flowchart style, making it easy to see the entire composition and quickly make changes. So working in nodes in Fusion is much faster than hunting through nested stacks of pre-composed layers and filters. So this node tree flows from one node to the next, and as one node applies an effect to an image, and then it passes it to the next one for additional processing.
And then it goes out. So this output feeds back into your edit, color, and Fairlight pages. So let's do a really quick effect so you can see how this pipeline works. I'll go into my effects library and open up my tools, and as you can see, there are a ton of tools that aren't put in this toolbar right here. And quickly just grab a warp tool and go into grid warp and drop it into the node graph. So because this node is not connected anywhere in this line right now, I can change stuff in my effects here, but it's not going to do anything to my clip. So let me reset that. And again, your inspector can show you all the different parameters. So what I'm going to do is connect this node, this grid warp effect, into my node line here, into my pipeline. So I'm holding shift and moving it down, and when I do that, hold it over to the line, you can see it becomes blue and yellow. I'll let go, and now it adds it into the pipeline here. So now when I am adjusting something, you can see that it's changing. Now, why is it? So this doesn't look like it's changing, but this one is changing here. It's because it's these viewers. I have media in one here, and this media out node in my second viewer, and you can see that right here. So these correspond to your viewer 1 or viewer 2, and depending on how many monitors you can see multiple things. So right now, this gray circle here, this gray dot, means that media in 1 is being viewed in viewer 1, media out is in viewer 2. I can switch that so that both 1 and 2 are media out, or I can switch it by hitting 2, and I can have media in my viewer 2. Okay, so that's how the viewers work. Let me switch this back so I will see the media in on my viewer 1, media out on my 2. I'll get back to grid warp so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so this effect is just ridiculous, but we're doing some work right now to warp the image, and media 1 in, this is the clip before, here's the effect, pipes into media out, and so this is how it works. When we click back into the edit page, we'll see this effect on it right there. Let me make it actually super obvious. Alright, go back to the edit page and it will update. We'll go back into Fusion and do something different to it, and then we go back to edit, and there it is. You can see over the clip is this red render bar. That means it's needing to render, and so there's my smart render cache going right now. Alright, so let me go back to Fusion and let's undo this, and let's take this guy out. So all I need to do is just hit delete. I select the node and I hit delete, and it's gone. So let's do some work to it. So this project is coming from a film called Hyperlight. It's a sci-fi story. So we need to do some visual effects and compositing to a few of these shots. This first shot here, we are going to add a heads-up display called a HUD over over this image here. So she wakes up and then she's looking at the heads-up display in front of her that's giving her information. She's looking around like that. Okay. Alright, so we're going to grab elements or assets from our media pool directly into Fusion, or into our node graph. So at the very bottom is a HUD, and let me drop this in right there. Now you can see that they're called media in, or media out, so I want to rename these so that it's a little bit more descriptive. So I'll click on my media 1 and I'll right click and then I will rename. Shortcut is F2. Rename this to actress. I'll rename this media out to output, and then this media in 2 is going to be my heads up display, HUD. So let me throw this HUD into our viewer. I'll close this in. Shortcut again is hitting 1 or 2 to show it in viewer 1 or viewer 2. I'll put that in viewer 2. Okay. This is the HUD, the heads up display. It has some colors here, and you can see that it will kind of move and blink. I also want to show you the different channels. So you can see right now it's seeing the full color channel. You can also see the red channel, green channel, and then blue channel, and then finally the alpha channel. So the alpha channel, what is an alpha channel? So essentially, an alpha channel it's a fourth channel that comes with the RGB channels, and the alpha channels determine which parts of an image are opaque and which parts are transparent. So if you look over here, the white parts of this alpha channel is opaque, meaning that's what you'll see. And then the black parts are transparent. So anything that's black right here will be transparent and you'll see through that. So let me change this back into my color. Alright, so you can see that checkerboard behind it. That means it's transparent. And you can even see parts of it that's somewhat translucent. So there's a little bit of a transparency in some of these images, parts of this image. So, okay, let me fit this back. Alright, so what we want to do is composite this on top of this image. And to do that, we will first use a merge node. So we need to merge these two together.
This is the merge tool, and it's found right here. This is how we're going to bring these two together. All right. Drag this down into that line, and when it turns blue, that means I am going to drop it into that node tree. So if you look at the merge node, you can see that it's got 3 different triangles and a square. All of our nodes have a triangle, which is this input and then an output. The merge node also has 2 triangles to show that one's a background input and one's a foreground input. This one, the blue one, is always an effects mask, and the square is an output. So we'll connect this output into the input because we want this to be on the foreground. So let's put this in our, right there. So we've merged it, we've composited it. That's compositing right there. Real simple. But now let's make it look better. So we want to make this, this graphic fit a little bit better on here. Now we don't have any controls to change or transform the size and the position of it, so we need to add a transform node. I'm going to move this HUD over here so it's directly above it. Then I'll add a transform node, which you can find here in the toolbar, or you can go and use the quick menu for the tools. I'll hit Shift space and it brings up our tool menu, and I can type in transform. And there it is. I'll click Add, and before I do that, you can see that the HUD is selected. So what that means is anytime I click on a node or an effect or tool, it will add it down the node tree. So this will add it down that node tree right there. So now I can use transform tools to transform this HUD. So this HUD goes down to some sort of transform. I'm going to size it down so it fits better. Okay, maybe a little bit more. All right. Next thing we want to do is, again, make it feel like this is, we're looking through a heads-up display glass at her. This is too sharp. Look at the graphics are a little bit too clear. So what we want to do is blur it just a little bit. So we have this transform tool here. This blur effect can effectively blur it just a little bit. Bring it. Okay. So I'll bring it up a little bit more. We don't want to make it too blurry. Okay, that looks fine. I'll fit this back in the window. Additionally, I want to create a blurred vignette of the background of the actress. So click on blur here to add that blur. I'm going to blur it a huge amount. Now, in doing that, I'm blurring the entire image, and that's not what I want to do. So what I want to do is create a mask to limit where this effect of this blur is going to occur. So if I want to create a vignette, it's more of a circular sort of mask, and the outsides of that is going to get blurred. This blue triangle right here indicates the effects mask. So if I click on my blur and then add one of these masks, we'll do an ellipse because that's kind of what a vignette looks like. So it limits the blur inside of this ellipse tool. Now I don't want it inside, I want it outside, so I'm going to invert. So now it's on the outside. Now I'm just going to size this up and down just to make the vignette look right. And finally I'll soften it up quite a bit. Okay, so now we have this blurred edge. So one of the final touches that we want to do on this heads-up display glass is to add a little bit of reflections, so it's like this glare from a light source. And if you look in the context of this shot, it would be the sun. All right, so we're going to add a paint tool and paint on this. So the paint tool is found right here, and we'll put it here. But to paint on it, we need some sort of canvas, and that's this background tool. So we're going to put the background first and bring this into the paint. We don't see anything because we haven't merged it into our timeline yet, or into our node tree. So I'm going to click on here and bring the merge tool so it's correct. So it's putting this HUD and the actress in the background, and we're going to merge this paint on the foreground on top of our HUD. So output here into the foreground, and it's become all black. So the background, clicking on here, this background node is just a solid black color. And since we haven't done any paint to it, we don't see any paint. So right now it's just an entire black solid over our image. And to fix that is, remember what we talked about in our alpha channel. So we're bringing down our alpha channel so that it's fully transparent, but it's still there so that we can paint on top. All right, so let's go into a paint tool, and we're going to use this stroke tool. And if you look, you can see that there's this green circle. I'm going to make it bigger, so it's around this size, and I'll do a little bit of a hit right here, and then maybe a little one in the corner over here. Okay, so now we've got the paint tool in two spots here. What we're going to do is actually customize these. So this is not what we want. This doesn't look right. We have to continue further modify it. So we're going to our modifiers tab in our paint node, and it looks like we've got 3 strokes. This third stroke we haven't done in another stroke yet. It's just anticipating that. So you can customize it before you actually make a stroke. But let's just click on stroke 1, I'm double clicking here, and adjust that. So if I click on stroke 1, you can see a stroke here. I can change my color. Now let's say this is from the sun, right? So it needs to be a little bit warmer, yellowish, warmer kind of look, and that looks good to me. And we'll create the same effect for the second stroke. Go into an orange-ish, warmish kind of look. And okay, that's okay enough for me. Now the final thing we want to do is now affect the way these guys merge with the HUD and with her background image. So I'm clicking on the merge, and I'm going to first adjust the way it blends in. So go down to the blend, and we'll blend it in halfway. It's around 5.5. You can see the blend is really what the opacity kind of slider is. So we'll blend it in here. Now it's blended in, but it still doesn't really look that great. So what we're going to do is change the way it blends in. So right now it's using an apply mode that's normal. There are many different ways of calculating how it blends in without really getting into too deep of the mathematics of it. Screen, adds, color contrast, multiply darkens the color contrast, or darken. And then stuff like overlay, soft light, hard light increases the color contrast. So I'll jump with overlay for this one and kind of blend it in like that. So there's a couple of reflections right here. So let's preview everything. So I'll hit Command L, or Command the left arrow to go to the beginning and play it. Okay, so it's looking okay. All right, so just an extra tip, the way you've connected it, so if you've connected it from an output to an input, or with the merge, you've connected it to the foreground or the background, it really doesn't matter where these nodes are physically positioned, because they will always be connected until you break this link. So they'll always be connected to the same place they're connected to, regardless of where you move the node. So right now it's connected to the green, and it's at the top. Let me move it to the right of the node. It's still connected to the green. If I move it to the bottom, it's still connected to the green. So it's still connected to the foreground, regardless of where you move that. And it's same with this. So regardless of where I'm moving this node, the connections still stay, and it just moves around on each side of the node. Let's save it, and let's go back to our edit menu, or edit page, and we can see this. I'm going to composite it in here. That's great. So moving on. All right, so moving down the timeline, we can see that we've got another marker here. So the next part is using layers from the edit page. So because Fusion is fully built into Resolve, so the layering and the transforms that you perform on the edit page carry over into the Fusion page. So let's look at a section where we've got two layers right here, this green screen shot. And let's look at how we can bring these two elements into Fusion. So if we look at this topmost layer, we can see that it's green, and below we can see that it's green screenshot, and then below it is this other shot. Let's disable this top layer so we can see what that is. It looks like the back of a planet. Okay, so we will highlight both of them and create a new Fusion clip. Doing so, when we jump over the Fusion page, does some work for us already. So let's bring in Media 1 in the Viewer 1, Media 2 in Viewer 2. Okay. So Media 1 in, so this is our background. This needs to be our foreground, so it's connected correctly. So let me move this up top and bottom. You can see that the connections still stay the same, but I'm just moving them. I'm going to rename this. This is our background, so it's our planet background, and this is our green screen foreground. All right, so I'll put it up top here. Okay. Now, shots like this, or shot with a camera, generally don't have an alpha channel built into it, like that computer-generated CG shot that we composited in with the heads-up display. So what we need to do is create a matte, and this is what the green screen's for. So this green screen here is going to be telling the software that this is going to be transparent. Everything that is not green is going to be opaque. So what we need to do is key out the green, and we are going into our effects library, going to our tools, and we need to go to our matte tools, and we'll choose the delta keyer. I'm going to pull this down into our node tree. All right, so we've got a delta keyer. I'm going to pull it down so we have more space. So I'm pulling the delta keyer in our viewer 1, hitting 1, closing the effects library, and our media out will be seen here. It's kind of the same because we haven't done anything just yet. So right now, clicked on the delta keyer, the view modes, the final result. Now which color do we want to key out? So I'm clicking and dragging this eyedropper tool over the green, and you can see that as I drop it over parts of it, you can see it keying out in real time. So I'm just doing the green. I'll do the green over here. I'll let go. Now this looks like a decent key, but there's some weird artifacting here. So what we need to do is actually look at our alpha. So I'm on my delta keyer right here, and I need to look at my alpha channel, see how it looks. Okay, so this and this are issues. So what we need to do is now go into our matte controls, which is right here, and change our black and white point of our matte. So this is our low point, and when I bring it over to the right, you can see that the black parts of the image are getting darker. I don't want to go too far, and then I want to bring the white parts of our image down, this high part, so that it is all included in a clean black and white matte, which looks pretty good. And the final thing I'll do is just blur it just a little bit, so blur the edges over here so that it's not too harsh. Okay, I'll save this. And let me jump back into color. I'll hit C. A and C jump back and forth from your color and your alpha. Okay, so I've got a good black and white here. All right, so this looks like a really nice key. And the background is right there. It's composited there. So let's command left arrow and let's play it. Okay, we can see that there is some camera motion in here. The camera is floating just a little bit, but the background's looking a little weird because right here, you can see that. All right, so what we need to do is track the motion and apply it to the background. So we'll track the motion of our foreground image. We'll go back to the beginning. And eventually take that tracking information and paste it to our background. All right, so to do that, I'm putting a node, tracker node. I'll hit my shift space to bring up my tools. And I'm typing in tracker. There it is. Green screen foreground node selected. I'll hit add, puts it in there. I'm hitting 1 on the tracker node so I can see specifically what it's going to be tracking. The tracker node automatically gives you a track point, and you can grab and change that track point to any place that you want. So we need to find a place on this foreground that's good. It has a good track point. Now we don't have any tracking markers here, so we're going to look any place that has a high contrast spot, which is right here. So I'm going to move my tracker's center over to this spot. And it's good because it's high contrast, and it'll look in this area, and because it's high contrast, it will be able to kind of keep with that spot as the camera moves up and down and kind of floats around. All right, so I've got my track point here, and to move my track point, you have to, it's a little weird, you have to kind of move your cursor not in the middle of that. The top left corner, there's this little box that highlights white when you hover over it, and that's the place where you click and drag. And then you put the center of the mouse over there. It's the way the Fusion works, so you just kind of have to work with that. All right, so it's tracked into that little spot right there. I'm going to keep it there. And since I'm at the beginning of my clip, I am going to track forward to the end, which is this. Now, if we were at a different point, if we're at the middle point, then we have to go track back and then track forward. If we're at the end, we would track back to the front. So tracking now, it's sticking to the tracker right there, and it looks like it's pretty darn good. Okay, so it's finished rendering, tracking. All right, now what we need to do is take this tracking information here, this tracked center. So it's tracked the center of this tracker 1, and apply it to this background, this planet background right there. So this planet background doesn't have any way of moving it left or right, so we actually need to add a transform node. So this is what we'll apply the tracking information to. So my transform node, I'm going to bring it up in viewer 1, and at the very center of this up in these red arrows here is this little square. I'm going to hold my mouse over and right click inside of that. At the very bottom, this is how we connect it. So remember how we looked at this tracker, and this was the transform tracked center 1. We go back here. That's what we need to do. This transform 1, the center, we need to connect that tracker 1 center, or transform to this unsteady position. Okay, so it's tracked it, and now it's moving along with this specific point, which is kind of like this entire shot. Now we do see some problems. Let me bring up this one window here and make it a bit bigger. Look at the edges of our mat. You can see past it right here. There's this edge, and then the bottom right there too. So there's a problem. So what we'll need to do, go back to this window and resize it. What we need to do is change the way this transforms. So I'll find a spot where we see the most right there, and we'll change the size so it fits that entire image. Save that. Now when we play it, none of the edges are creeping in. And to this side also. So we are clear. We're good. Now if you wanted to move this background so you see more of this planet kind of here, right now we just see a lot of black space in this little part right there. So we can't move the center here, so what we need to do is actually go back to the tracker, and let me pull this into 1. And at the bottom of our tracking parameters here, there's an X and Y offset. This is where we can change where this the offset is. So we need to offset our X. So let's say we want to move it to the left. We'll move it to our left. And then if we want to move it higher, then we can bring it up like this. Now, here's that problem again, right? We can't move it too high, or we will then kind of see it. So we can move it even more. You can just kind of see where it stops. You can just kind of move it with the X offset a little bit until it's in a place where it looks right to you. So we can play that. All right, there's a problem right there. Can't really move it vertically too much unless we size it up even more. I'm totally fine with this. This looks good. You can see kind of the light here on him. It looks like it's being reflected or coming off of this planet reflection right there. Okay. So that's tracking motion. Let's get back to the edit page and take a look at that. Okay, so the green screen is good.
Just 2 hours ago, boom, there's this explosion and it surrounded the whole ship.
All right, that works. So now that we're done with this green screen keying, we can move on to the next shot. So we could go back to the edit page and then jump to whatever shot we need to go. But in the Fusion page, you can do that also without having to leave. At the top, you can go into the interface toolbar and enable clips. You can see a timeline of the clips that you've got. I'm going to go to the very beginning of the shot, of the timeline, I'm sorry, and hide my clips. And I'm going to add some motion graphics to it. We'll add a title for this film, which is called Hyperlight. We have a Text Plus tool, and this is what we'll use to create a title. I'm going to drag this in. And I'm going to bring it in my first viewer. Okay, so very similar to the Text Plus tool in the edit page, we have all the same kind of tools, but we have even more tabs that we can visit here. So we'll type in first Hyperlight. I'll capitalize this. I'll make it a light font. Okay, and let's bring it up a little bit more. Okay, that sounds good, or that looks good. Save that. Then to further refine it, we'll jump into our shading, and we can add colors and change the way it looks. So in here, I'm going to change my type to gradient. So it's now going to use a gradient color. This is the end, and this is the bottom and the top. So let me change the bottom to something that's warm. Yeah, some light yellow to a warm orangish yellow. Okay, that looks good. Now, secondly, we can have multiple different elements of shading. So the second one here, we don't have it enabled to turn it on. We'll click on it and enable. Now this is called a red outline, so you can see a red outline, but you don't really have to follow it. We can just change it up if we wanted to. So I want to do a drop shadow and change the appearance of it being more of a text fill, and instead of it being red, we're going to, well, we can change it all the way to the black. And we'll scroll down in the inspector and we'll open up the softness. We'll set both of these to 5. I can type in 5 and start seeing it a little bit. Then we'll open the position section, and so we'll position our shadow. We'll bring it a little bit off, and oops. So we want to mimic the way this lighting is here, so the shadow here. So the sun's coming from camera right and casting a shadow on the left, so that's what we'll do there. So we'll move our offset X to the negative portion, and we'll bring our negative to our Y to negative, so it's down. And let's soften it up just a bit more. Let's go with 10 for both to approximate the softness of the shadow here. So what we need to do now is composite this on top. And we'll use our trusty node. Let me rename this first to planet, and this is our output, and this is our hyperlight. Okay, so I'm going to drop a merge here, and it's merging in the background. This goes into our foreground. Oh, there we go. And we've made a title there. And we can refine it a little bit more. I don't like how far this is out, so I'll go back to my offset a little bit here, and then even further down. Okay, so it looks fine to me. You can also play with the way it blends into your title, or into the background, by using not only the blend, but your apply mode. You can see how all these different methods affect how this looks. There's something about overlay that's kind of interesting here. We'll keep it as overlay for now. Next thing we want to do is animate the title. So we'll do a nice little fade in and fade out. With this merge here, we're going to, we'll go at the beginning and we'll set a keyframe for our blend. And then we'll move down, let's say 24 frames. So this is 1 second in, and I'll set another keyframe. So I'm bringing the blend down and it fades up within 1 second. So okay, there it fades in. Maybe I want to fade it in and then fade it out. So 24 frames back gives me 176, and I'll click a keyframe there, and I'll just drop that out. In, and then out. Okay. Additionally, I can go back to my hyperlight and my text I can even change the tracking. So I can keyframe all of these with these diamonds out there. So I'll start at I'll start here at frame 35. I'll make a tracking and I'll have it track out this way. Okay. So if we wanted to take a look, I'll go Command left and let's see how it looks. And then it starts tracking after it fades in and goes all the way through. Okay. Now, let's say we wanted to customize the way the keyframes are and the way the interpolation of the movement is. We can jump into our interface toolbar. We can see this keyframes right here, and then a spline editor right there. I'm going to close my inspector and even my node so we can get all of this here. First thing I want to look at is my keyframes, so I'm going to pull that out further. Okay, so we can see keyframes here. I'm going to click on, and we can change the zoom in and out of it with this right here. I'm going to actually zoom to fit or Command F. So it fits in everything. You can click these disclosure triangles here and it will show you where your keyframes are. So this blend right here is my fade in. And let's say I wanted to have it fade in even more. I can click and drag that keyframe further down. And right there also I can move that keyframe. Same with this. And that keyframe. So I'll bring that out even more. If I wanted to change the way let's say the tracking was, so if you see it, it starts, there's no movement and then it starts to track out. And same at the other end, it's tracking and then it just stops. I'd like to change the way it eases in and eases out. So I'll bring up my character spacing, which is my tracking. I'll zoom to fit that. And I can highlight each of these keyframes. You can see that it's highlighted now. And I can change the interpolation of it. I'll smooth it out. You can see that it moves up and goes there. So if I play it, you can see that the way the tracking moves is a little different. So I'll let it cache. All right, so we'll switch back to the edit page and we can see that the render cache is caching it. You can play it. It's going to choke a little bit. Once it finishes that render cache, it'll be good to play. So the Fusion page is a feature-rich, powerful compositing app that's been in development for many, many years. So don't expect to know everything after this lesson. Like, it's not, please don't expect that you'll know how to use everything in Fusion. It's nice to know that you can do a lot of these VFX types of things, motion graphics types of things inside the program, and it'll update, and you don't have to conform going in and out of different programs.
All right, so that was lesson 9. So please make sure you look through all the questions in the lesson review at the end of the lesson 9 chapter in the PDF.